Mike from around the world. Mike, how you doing tonight?
Pastor Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I am blessed and highly favored. Are you ready for a new year?
Had a small audio problem. I think it's good now.
Sounds better. It does. It does.
Good.
All right, Mike. Hey, Mike, I titled this show tonight, 2022 Apocalyptic Warnings from Mike from around the world.
That sounds appropriate.
Okay, so we want to find out what you see in this upcoming year, where things that may be about to take place or could very well take place or will take place in 2022. And so we want to start out with you and just ask you that question, see where you go with this.
Well, if people can get used to what's been happening, but have that escalated a few times, like weather phenomenon, Pastor, that's going to be a big one. Weather will be it'll seem like it's a direct enemy of mankind. I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again. People will be frightened of the forecasts. They're going to be frightened of the forecasts because of the damage it will cause. We talked about fires last week.
Yeah.
They are a problem this week. We talked about the hail and the storms last week, unexpected, and we're dealing with that this week. So we're going to have an increase in this phenomenon. It really is just getting started. We'll be talking about a super blizzard in a couple of weeks.
What?
So we're going to have things out of place. Nobody should be surprised if areas like, for example, suppose Arizona, we wake up one day, Arizona, it has a severe flood warning for the entire state. Things like that we'll begin to see again. Where some of these dry lake beds are, like Area 51, everybody knows that. They're going to get flushed out, and they know it. So we're going to have a severe change in this, and it won't be because of El Nino. We have a global weather altering that's happening right now. And the atmosphere, of course, it's still being inundated with heavy particles. Some of those are exotic particles. Exotic, meaning they're outside of the scope of our everyday particles that we deal with. A lot of them are radioactive. We are going to have an increase in some type of radioactive particle coming into the atmosphere near the middle of the year. I don't know how they're going to deal with that, but there's a host of things.
Now, wait a minute. Okay, because you just said that we're going to have a radioactive material coming in by around mid-year. We're going to have to deal with that. Before I can absorb that, I'm still struggling with you saying Arizona is going to be flooded.
Yeah.
And then I'm also struggling with they're going to flush out Area 51. Okay, let's take the first one. Are you serious with the first one? Arizona? Because you know how many times I've sung, I got some oceanfront property in Arizona. Are you saying it's going to come to pass?
Yeah, you're going to have it there. So, most of these telltale signs, you're going to see them in Russia. Russia's a good place to watch for global landmass changes regarding temperature. They're going to have a severe melt, a total melt, a dangerous melt of permafrost. In fact, they're going to have a case in their hands, Pastor Paul. You're looking at a place where the greater percentage of Russia is held up by internal ice cores and things like that. Now, when it begins to really melt because of magma, it's going to loosen the rocks. So you're going to have a lot of land shifts taking place in Russia. It's going to be very dangerous for the people. They too will have to deal with quite a bit of water, or the land actually sinking into the water. So, and then of course, Arizona, yeah, they're going to have a lot of water problems. I'm sure they're not equipped to deal with it. And that whole area at one point was underwater before. So we're going to have a resettlement of these water-laden areas in these dry, arid regions. We're going to have almost like a reversal of what they were. So that's the weather phenomena, and it's going to get really bad. again, you're looking at storms with probably about, I'll say 20, 30, maybe 100 times more lightning than what's being experienced. Kind of like
What?
Australia had. Australia had a storm that let off quite a few bolts of lightning all at one time. Utah did too. So we'll certainly see that in more places. That includes tornadoes. That includes unreasonable amounts of hail. If it does not come down in size, it will certainly come down in volume. It's going to be very dangerous because when it gets heavy, if people would just, they're going to pay attention to this because they're going to have to listen to these weather warnings. These storms can form. They're going to form this summer in less than probably 20 minutes. Can you imagine having a clear forecast, but in 20 minutes, everything reverses. And all of a sudden you have, large hail that's killing animals, destroying crops all over the place. With this increased atmospheric phenomenon that's taking place, you're going to have that potential of hail all over the planet, right? So just weather by itself is going to be very devastating. And ironically, people are going to hate the rain. The rain will be it's going to saturate everything. It'll cause a prolonged type of fog is what it will be. And I'm sure there have been a lot of people who have dreamt probably about 5 years ago about fog being everywhere, like a mist, like smoke being everywhere. I say that, Pastor Paul, because the meteorologists they observe things too, and they've observed that when people start talking about their dreams dealing with the atmosphere, they normally come true.
I know.
They don't know how, but they normally come true. In fact, when it comes to dreams, a lot of people pay attention to people's dreams. It's almost like a communication, especially when you have 70% of the populace that start streaming a similar thing. They know it's going to take place. That's just I threw that in there because they actually do pay attention to it.
Yeah.
This year, we're going to be looking for some pretty severe things regarding weather. And that's just the beginning.
Okay. So large hail and or large volume of hail.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That in itself is huge. To have 100 times more lightning than normal is insane. You have to understand how hard it is to grasp, to digest that. But it sounds like that is going to be coinciding with large hailstorms, thunderbolt lightning. Must be some really bad T-storms. Do you see, I guess, increased, look, we had the tornado that hit through Kentucky and the 6 states. Or you think we're going to see that? That thing must have been an F5 or 6. They really don't know how big that thing was. It was the longest. It stayed on the ground 227 miles. They haven't come up with the final report on what it was a monster. Do you think that's going to keep happening? That kind of stuff?
We talked about that, Pastor Paul. We talked about tornadoes being extenuated as far as their scope, their sheer scope. We talked about this about a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
How that a tornado would be more like, will come more like a hurricane, right?
Yeah.
And that who knows what they're going to call a hurricane. But imagine a thunderstorm the size of the USA. Now they're going to listen, they have a responsibility not to alarm the people. So naturally, folks, when there's a thunderstorm, a single system, right? A single system. They're going to say, well, it's not one big system. It's multiple systems. I'm telling you right now, you can listen to the wordplay, or you can say, hey, it doesn't matter. It's covering the entirety of the U.S. What does this mean? Because people are going to start asking these questions. By the way, that leads to more anxiety and stress. You know what's happening with that? As people have more anxieties and more stress, Pastor Paul, they're making a home for more entities within themselves.
Yeah,
which is unfortunate. So all these events they're causing. Times are shaping up just like prophecy in so many ways. But the weather itself is going to become very crippling to a lot of cities. Now, we have to think about infrastructure because with consistent hail damage, you're looking at insurance prices that are off the records. They're going to be over the top. Imagine a thunderstorm that comes through 3 consecutive times and does the damage of Katrina 3 times. How can any insurance company cover that, right? So that's going to cause some type of a financial crisis. Because that money is going to have to come from somewhere, or insurance companies won't be able to cover the damages. When you start thinking about natural disasters costing money, we're going to be in a bit of a pickle.
So you're saying
right? We're going to have it. I tell you what, it will probably get so bad we're going to have extra help from other countries, right? Because we sit right in the middle of, I don't know, it's almost like if you can think of Kansas and dealing with tornadoes all the time, it's like the U.S. sits in the middle of a boiling pot, right? And we get the worst of these hot and cold systems that come into the U.S. and start doing damage. That will increase quite a bit. We're going to have to deal with quite a bit of the fallout. Other countries like Europe, they're going to be devastated by winds, sheer winds. But we're going to have to deal with the grunt of moisture. Now, with that comes a problem with the oceans. Naturally, we have an issue in the Atlantic, which is going to further cause more. It's going to stress the oceans in ways we haven't seen. So people ought to get ready for
which
a
ocean.
change.
Which ocean, Mike, is the more violent? Is it going to be the Pacific or the Atlantic or the Indian Ocean or something? Which one's going to be more violent?
Well, it'll be in one place, then the other, then the other, then the other, then the other. So no calm places. There are going to be no calm places. And as it disturbs one portion of the oceans, naturally it's going to affect the rest, because you're dealing with a current. We have current flow in the ocean, which this is going to be disrupted. When that's disrupted, the weather patterns change even more. So the evaporation rate of the water, salinity, all those factors that go into the ocean, they're going to start altering. And what that does is it changes where wildlife actually hangs out, right? So imagine a bunch of whales hanging out on the East Coast, eating up all the fish. That's going to affect quite a few things. Now they're already preparing the Gulf for this. They're doing things in the water near the Gulf to stop some of the larger creatures from getting in there, because they already see some of the patterns forming, right? Some of the feeding zones, they're changing. The currents are also shifting. So we're going through a change of changes. And as this continues, everybody's going to have to deal with water. Lots and lots of water. I think people are going to get sick of flooding and waters.
Going to hate the rain. I wrote this down. Hate the rain. When you said that, I thought of, was it John Fogerty? It says, who'll stop the rain? I'm just wondering who's going to. God is in control, though, isn't he? He's in control.
He warned us about this. He warned us about this, right? And then, Pastor, here's what's ironic. I'll stake everything I am on this. After dealing with the rain, when people are saturated, they can't stand it. Mold is growing all over the place, and they have a problem with, the water conditions. It will absolutely stop. It's going to stop, and everything will dry up. See, as this binary system continues to come inbound, we're going to start having some very strange effects in the atmosphere. One of those effects is our humidity is going to drop down so fast, so far. There'll be no rain. It will gradually decrease, and then it will exponentially hit that point where no rain falls at all. And the only way to restore the rain, of course, is to get rid of whatever body is disrupting us already, right? That's under our Father's control. Didn't he say in Jeremiah, the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way?
Yes, he did.
We have some, that can be interpreted 1,000 ways.
Right.
But because it was echoed in several other books, some of the books that people don't read that are biblical,
Well, let me ask you.
We're dealing with something.
All right, now we're talking about this now. Okay, now for about the last 2 months or so, anyway, actually for years, you've been telling us the binary system was coming, and that the closer and closer it gets, there'll be no hiding this. Okay, the effects of the earth, whether it be volcanoes, earthquakes, violent storms, extreme weather conditions, straight line winds, wildfire. I mean, everything, including in the meteor storm and all this that's coming. Now, today we had the massive, just come out of nowhere. The wind whipped up to 115 miles an hour. It was consistently holding around 100, 105, blowing through right into Denver. And it stoked 2 fires that had been burning out quietly in the forest. And here they come raging. It didn't matter about the snow blizzard. Didn't matter how cold it was. Here they came. They said there was flames that were literally leaping out the length of a football field in seconds. It burnt 580 homes down, folks, in 2 different communities on the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. Thousands, tens of thousands of people have had to flee. It happened this afternoon. It came out of nowhere. Mike, is that what you're talking about?
Oh, yeah. And take note about fire. When fire begins, right, that's a lot of hot air rising, mixing with the cooler atmospheric air, right, which causes updrafts. And when these updrafts begin to form, they swirl laterally, right, causing wind speeds to almost double. Without that fire, wind speeds would have only been probably maximum 40 miles an hour, right? But because of the warmth and the initialization of this wind, it just kind of fed itself, right? Like an engine started to feed itself. So imagine not only Colorado, but imagine large portions of the West on fire, the Midwest and the East on fire. And imagine what's going to happen with the air then, with these, because this storm was simply, 3 low pressure systems and a high pressure influence up in the north. But when they met, it was naturally going to cause winds right there where they met, where the isobars were tightly packed. But the fires just increased that dramatically. They also changed the conditions of the storms. And that was a pretty small fire. So imagine, Pastor Paul, that you have a storm the size of the U.S. with 1 low pressure system that's massive, 1 high pressure system that's massive, and then half the country is on fire, or fires all over the country. And when I say half the country, look at the maps of the U.S., the fire maps of the U.S., right? And you're going to see what I'm talking about. At least half this country is going to be up in flames, and it will most certainly mess with things. Then we have to deal with, based on the timing, right after the weather phenomenon totally takes people by surprise. When the roofs are missing and everything else, we're going to have the fall of fire. We have to go through a season of fire falling from the heavens, literally. We're going to have to go through a season of that.
Okay, folks, this is Mike around the world with us tonight, and of course we're asking him, can you tell us what are the apocalyptic warnings for 2022? And he's throwing them. I'm trying to write them down as fast as we go. He's throwing things at us so quickly. And the one storm over America, a storm the size of the country of America with just 1 pressure system is insane. But let me ask you this, Mike. We heard today, we've been hearing you talk about it for years. You've been telling us little by little, piece by piece, inch by inch, precept upon precept, line upon line, here or there, a little there. But now we have an announcement. I don't know how to confirm or deny it. I got it from Steve Quayle. I'd already received it earlier in the day from the Hal Turner radio show. But here, I'll put it up on the screen. Dr. Kaplan, let me read it. Let me read it real quick and get Mike's take on this. Dr. Kaplan, from a professor from in Texas, from Austin, Texas, the University of Texas at Austin, identifying himself on the Hal Turner radio show, made the statement. He said, "We have discovered an alien planet. It exists and it is inbound toward Earth, not to hit the Earth, but headed in this direction. It is an alien planet, quite large. We've seen it on a 2.7 meter Harlan J. Smith telescope at the McDonald Observatory in Austin, or in Texas. And we found it on January 26, 2014 at about 10 p.m. Texas time. He said, it is coming from the back behind the sun, and it is headed in this direction. It is a planet-sized object, and it will be at Earth by August of 2022. But we will experience, apparently he's saying we'll experience, what we'll experience from it will be worse after August 2022. That actually it's going to affect us worse in 2023. So let me ask you, Mike, is this what you've been talking about? Are these guys, and he gave us the coordinates. He gave us the coordinates, and they're on the ticker right now as you're looking at the program. And there's the coordinates. So Mike, what is this? Is this a real deal? What we got here?
Well, Pastor Paul, there's the sun has been hiding something. Yes, it has. Now about the Harlan J. Smith telescope, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. There are several locations that back in 2014 they identified through a Q frame part of a system that looked like a system, and as they analyzed this further, they found out it had some sort of a parallel orbit with our system, right? They were trying to determine, was it locked or what's going on with this thing? Well, then you had two objects or two things that were going in and out of frame that were pretty consistent, which means it was from a much larger system was involved here. So that object they were picking up could have been some type moon to another planet, right? Or a planet or whatever the case was. As the days went on, critical areas in space that the sun is obscuring have drawn quite a bit of money and attention. And not everybody can see it or couldn't see it because our angle was off, and it was very difficult to detect because you'd have to look right through the sun. Well, that's not going to be the case here soon enough. Remember I said we're going to see another moon in the sky?
Yeah, you did. You said that a week or two ago. Right.
And the color of that moon will be a brownish, tannish gray, right? Like it'll look like it has these brownish continents on it, right? So that'll really get people's attention. But here's the sad part. With another system coming into this system, when you spot that system, it's as it approaches us, the entire system is speeding up, right? It's speeding up, coming in our direction. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's every day is going to increase its speed because you have two large gravitational forces that are coming together. They're going to draw upon each other faster and faster. And when you go through celestial mechanics and common mathematics, you see the rate of increase on these things are just enormous, which will increase certain effects that we have down here, like gravity. For example, gravity is going to decrease itself just a bit. So a lot of people are going to say, hey, I lost weight. But the truth will be we're going to have a disruption in the centrifugal forces of this planet. So things will be a bit inconsistent for a while. That causes nausea, by the way, bad nausea. Motion sickness is what it will cause. I mean, bad motion sickness, right? So you're going to have a lot of people that just, can you imagine half the U.S. feeling sick? And as it continues to approach these other systems, there are going to be discharge exchanges between these two objects. Now, they've observed this out in deep space quite a few times. Pastor Paul, some of the power exchanges are quite violent. You're looking at sustained plasma conduits being stuck to the surface of each planet, like a lightning bolt that will not move, right?
Yeah. And
in fact, we found out on the Earth in some of the etchings. I know what's popular, what people have watched on television, what's been in the books. But let me give a small piece of education, if I could. In some of these etchings, you'll see what looks like a stick figure, right, of a person, and it looks like almost like a hourglass, right? That's a plasma conduit. that hourglass shape is a plasma conduit. That's an
Plasma
observed,
conduit.
sustained plasma conduit.
Plasma.
Looks like a triangle upon a triangle. And sustained meaning the thing will stay there 5, 6, 10 minutes, whatever the case is, based upon the proximity of these other planets. And that's very bad, because these things have a radius. You can't really get close to them, but they will. Vitrification will be seen all over the place, which means they have the ability to turn sand or dirt into glass, causing these amber glass, sheaths to be on the ground like a lot of the Egyptians used to use. And they had sheets of this stuff under the ground in Mexico, right?
Yes.
It was sand from the earth that's been turned into an amber glass.
Yes.
But they were under the earth. They had lots of it. So they must have picked this stuff out of the ground, but they also had some inscriptions, some history with them, that these conduits came down and caused this. They were all over the place, burning up everything, and anybody who was near them was gone, was fried, right? So you're dealing with that type plasma energy, sustained plasma energy, being seen, observed. That's part of the power exchange. They called them fire tongues, right? Fire tongues is what they call them.
And I've heard of this, and that's, we know that if sand is blasted hard enough, it can turn into glass. And I'm asking you, I guess I've heard that maybe a meteorite or an asteroid may have hit in that area because it created all this glass. Is that what you think caused that? They
thought that.
Okay.
They thought that, but the problem was underneath that area, right? They found more of a different color, and come to find out the ground at that time was of a different substance. So the glass color was consistent with the type of sand and rock and silicate that were, that was in that strata. They're finding this all over the earth, right? And we're talking about below the iridium layer, right? Which they lied about the iridium layer, because there's more than one iridium layer. And in several parts of the earth, you don't have an iridium layer. It's not there. It's only in parts of the earth, like Africa, when they found those uranium mines and they found tunnels that water had been pumped through to cool down the uranium. So they were using uranium a long time ago, right? In fact, they mined it, a lot of uranium. Anyway, that's sort of that's a nuclear reactor.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. And so
they found them there. They found them in Mexico. They found some more there they found them right there in where the Mayans had set up their pyramids, right about 400 feet below that. They have some secrets they didn't tell anybody yet. And they've been trying to tell the world, but the world is not listening. Anyway, so there's some pretty elaborate things they found. But the point is, upon being close in proximity to this orbiting body out there, to this body that has its cyclical approach to the earth is utterly decimated, destroyed every single time in different ways. Now, personally, I believe that what we're about to experience it cannot be described as a planet. It cannot be described as some average thing that's out there. I don't believe it can be described that way. I say that because I've seen too much in my lifetime, and I know that what people see and study as far as planets and everything else, that's all fine and dandy, but there are things out there that make no sense. They are outside. These are real physical things that you can see. We're not talking about something that's in another dimension. We're talking about in reality, Pastor Paul. There are things you cannot describe that are dangerous, dark. They seem like, don't even talk about that subject. That's what it it seems to.
Let me ask you a question. So you're confirming that, yes, in 2014, they did see this planet-like, moon-like, planet-sized object, and they knew it was a system. They seen it 7 years ago. It's been 7 years since then. We've gotten better telescopes, and we got better probes out there, and it's gotten a lot closer. So now they're starting to identify it. It could be a moon. It could be like a orbiting moon of a bigger star or comet or dwarf star. Could this be what we're looking at, Mike?
It very well could be. It could be, Pastor Paul. I know to date they found over 200 objects out there. 200. So
behind the sun,
that's quite a bit.
Behind the sun.
We're talking about close proximity to our solar system, right?
Okay.
So that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Now, when something is in observable space, and what I mean by that, if something were as close to us as Mars is, say like Mars is, right? The Earth would be in big trouble. Big trouble.
It'd already be destroyed almost, wouldn't it?
We'd be in big trouble. Yeah, because you're looking at something with a different rate of force as it moves through our solar system. You're looking at a disruptor, something that could absolutely. So, because think of this: what if something came that close, was in proximity with our orbits, and just slammed into another planet, right? Because that would potentially happen. It is by nature, almost unavoidable that we're going to have more debris. Where do people think the asteroid belts came from? I know what they have read and what some people try to believe, but the truth is something was there. Something disrupted and cut off that asteroid belt. Something exited that was quite large, moving all the rocks out of the way. And because it is space and things move kind of in a preformed fashion, kind of slow, something quite large with a lot of velocity just took an exit. And whatever it was is likely coming back. So,
so you see, okay, so let's kind of take a step back here. You see 2022 then as not the year of complete destruction of the earth, but that certainly we're going to see a lot more extreme storms, tornadoes, lightning strikes, excessive cold, bitter storms, super blizzards, and then intense heat, and then intense drought, and then tons of rain. We're going to hate the rain, and we're going to see these extremities, these extremes. Arizona flooding. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, so you see this being the year of 2022 being a big time year, but you don't see it as the destruction of the earth. No, like it could be or may have happened, or in times past. Is it, what will it do to the sun in 2022?
Our sun is will experience, or our sun is a good indicator, right?
Yep.
Of the proximity of the binary star, right?
Yep.
So just like we're on Earth away from the sun, so we'll whatever they call Nibiru is going to be away from that main star. I personally do not believe. I just don't believe that what Zechariah Sitchin was trying to describe or decipher was a star. I don't believe that was a star. I believe it was an element of a bigger system.
Maybe
I believe
a planet?
they've already identified our sister star. I believe they've already identified that.
Yeah.
They have a good time frame in mind, right? See, listen, if it exists, they would have spent most of their resources locating this thing in a very discreet way, running all calculations and simulations. They would have had the smartest people on the planet begin to prepare for this. They will have prepared quite a bit for it, right? And during the time of its approach, they would absolutely abandon operations topside, because in their way of thinking, Pastor Paul, they have to save by priority. And they have to save people based on who is worthy, to carry on civilization should the inevitable take place. You just can't go underground. You have to acclimate to go underground.
Right.
I know that personally. You're not going to go underground and say, well, I'm going to go down the elevator. That's it. No. It takes 4 years. 4 years to acclimate to going underground. So you'd have to see people disappear. Right.
Yeah.
And during that time, they would live within chambers in artificial sunlight to acclimate to going underground before they lived there. Because if we have a passage of something, and say a devastation lasted for 14 years, they would have to plan to stay down there for at least 20, 30, 40 years, right? To have adequate supplies. They would have to have all this filtration, and everything would have to be prepared. That takes a lot of people. And it also means you can't have everybody down there who previously lived up here. Now, this is very important. if everybody was up here, just, we're just doing our thing, then all of a sudden we hear dangers coming, we go run underground. It doesn't work that way. It works that way in the movies. It doesn't work that way. So what you'd have to do is years before that, right? You would have to have people born underground who know nothing about civilization on the top. And what these folks would do is be trained to do certain things. They would believe that's how it is, and they would keep it operational. They wouldn't deal with the stresses of changing from going topside to underground, because the average person would go crazy without the sky, without seeing the sky, without seeing the sun, without hearing other people without hearing birds. You can go insane if you are just suddenly switched to a different environment like that. So they would have to have people born under there. If that operation were to take place, they would have completed that a while ago.
Let me ask you a question then, Mike. Have they already taken newborn babies and just immediately taken them underground, and they're raising them right now underground in this artificial world they're creating for this event?
Well, think of this. There's an army, Pastor Paul, that has, I believe it's 190,000 robot troops, right?
What?
But nobody really found out about it.
No, not nobody you really said it, right?
Right? So think of that. Now, they can do research and build this army of robots, right? And then it's not really mainstream, which tells you something. People's attention is on the subject's top side, right? And you got to this is where discernment plays its role. I'm going to ask you a question. Does anything they're doing make sense? Does it even seem real to you, what they're doing?
No.
Or does it seem like about 15 years ago, something changed?
Yes. It feels like we're living, time has been, Mike, it feels like I'm living in a bad B movie.
Well, there you go. Okay. There you go. Because really listen, about that time ago, many years ago, the sincerity of government changed. It just changed. It was also the time when other countries were also attempting to talk to Americans outside of their own government, but it wasn't permitted. Remember that? Yep. Nobody messed with America during those times either. But ever since that time, it seems like it's been made up or something like that. Even the characters seem they don't care at times. It's almost like an actor. An actor, they can do a good movie. It doesn't mean they want to do that movie again and again and again. They don't want to work that hard, right? So they pour themselves into this acting. For the money, that's the reward. Well, what if the reward was your family would be saved? I can tell you right now, you pour every bit of yourself into acting to fool everybody if you could do that. And if people would take a sincere look at what's happening. Let me give you one example. They have tried the threats. How many times have you heard that Iran is 1 year away from breakout? How many times?
Since John Hagee wrote the book in 2001. I read it. Okay, so I've been waiting for it 20 years now. Okay.
There you go. Yep. And every year so listen, but are people even questioning that out loud? No, they're not. They're not doing it. They keep buying it, don't they?
Yep.
It's almost like you can tell people anything, and as long as it comes from an official channel that's been appointed, people believe it. I'll tell you right now, this is happening not only with Iran, it's happening all throughout politics. And if you look at it carefully and kind of, if a person could cut off their own emotions and just observe, then they would say, there's no way that they're saying the same thing over and over again. They're having the same problem over and over again, right?
Yep.
And then you have other nations like China, who does not go along with the U.S., who is also, they're going to preserve their own people.
Yes.
Because many years ago, they were cut out of the deal. Who was making all the plans for people who would go underground? The USA was. And those plans were public. But they retracted everything. All of a sudden, they retracted everything. Russia was also ousted from being, one of the main players. Also, England was ousted from being one of the main players. And if you go back and look at the relationships, it was a bit rocky. And ever since that time, people have had these weird agendas. So what are they really doing? If a doom was coming, then everybody's mind in the real government is going to be on getting those underground facilities checked and rechecked, occupied, working. They must be working, sealed. They must be sealed, because once whatever begins, begins. You can't go outside and say, oops, I forgot to, I didn't make this airtight. Most people look at Cheyenne Mountain, correct? And they say, oh, that's the place. No, it isn't, because people know about it. The places that are the real places nobody knows about. We have to remember something. If the public knows something, so does the enemy. If the enemy knows it or the people know it, they're going to want to know more about it. They will effectively infiltrate anything they know about. And so when it comes to important things and secrecy, there are no leaks and nobody knows about it. That's upmost. They're not going to know. But here's some telltale signs. If you live in the desert, if you lived in the desert the year 2015 through 2020, you would have seen vents open up, which means a lot of dirt would all of a sudden fly up in the air with a big whoosh and probably some type of movement or an explosion. That's what you would hear. Because when they blow the vents, that's exactly what they sound like. They're loaded with explosives to blow steel brackets out. These are vents opening. And when they shut those vents, they're shut forever. They open them once, they shut them forever. When they do this, equipment is coming online. We're talking about equipment that powers for electricity. You're talking about air filtration systems that work deep into the air, things like that.
I just saw
a lot of people. They're going to. Well, I just probably experience this and have no placement for it.
Right. I just saw that in Iceland, they just created the first air carbon cleanser plant, where they can literally grab smog and the air, carbon out of the air, and sift it, and it comes back out, no carbon in it. The first plant has been built. It's in Iceland. They're going to start building them all over. But I have a feeling that type of technology is already underground in this environment, this artificial environment they're creating. Some type of filtering system.
If it's public, Pastor Paul, if it's made public, it's already been tested, invented, and put into use. It's kind of like some of these companies like Lockheed and all these works and all this stuff. Some of the things, let me give you an example that everybody understands, right? The technology in a car, right? Just be quick, parking yourself and the Bluetooth and all this. Do you not know that all of that came out in a specific model car in 2004? You know what that was?
No.
That was a Saab 930 Linear and Arc 2004. All the technology in these cars you have today came out in 2004 in that car. Yeah. How is that possible? How could they have Bluetooth back then? How could they have GPS and all this navigation stuff? They had it in that car. And if you go look at some of the specs of that car, every car with this technology is built off those specs. You can see it.
Yeah.
So that's an example, right, of just how sneaky things are operating.
I know my son Brock was riding with me in the car the other day, and my car, you just push a button and it starts, right? You don't have to turn. There's no more key anymore. You just push a button and start. And I said, he laughed. He was driving my car because I'm having a struggle driving. And so he was driving me, taking me somewhere, and he started the car up the button and he started laughing. I said, why are you laughing? He said, this is so funny. When I was in the Army and training for Afghanistan, I was driving Humvees that had these already in them.
Yeah.
He said, you don't realize we had built-in GPS systems on the dash in Humvees in Afghanistan. He goes, you just don't realize how far they have stuff ahead of you. And he goes, that's just the little things I can tell you about, Dad. There's stuff way over my pay grade that, So what you're saying, Mike, they're 40 to 50 years ahead of us in most.
Yeah, they're already secure. Supersonic transportation underneath the U.S. It already exists. People are starting to find this out. There was it was almost leaked last month. But anyway, that just goes to show you that these guys, listen, some of the things that are happening today, they absolutely correspond or are relational to the preparations they have already made to get people on the ground. There are all the important people. Where are they? They're gone. All the people that cared about this country, all the people that really cared about Russia. All right.
Yeah.
You don't see those people.
No, they're where did they go? I don't know.
A long time ago in 1991, I was told when I was in the Middle East, I overheard a conversation. and some guys were talking. They say, hey, you know, they're about to make him go missing. That's what they kept saying. Anyway, later on, I think I spoke to you about it, Pastor, on your show. One of the first times I spoke, I said, when you start seeing people, important people, die off, you know, too many at a time, don't believe for a moment they're dying off. If you stop seeing people on video where you see sunlight, trees, and other people's, that person is they're important. And sure enough, you have all these. Remember the scientists that died?
Yep.
You don't even know if they died. The people going missing, MH370. How do we know that those people truly, you know, were on that aircraft?
There was
You're
right. There was 18.
They could have been transported to another location.
And
That's
I think
a good cover to cover for people.
Yeah, I really believe there was 18 people on there who were semiconductor engineers from Austin, Texas. 18 of them on one plane.
Oh, by the way, all anybody had to do was look up and see. When they transport these scientists, they have military escorts, satellite tracking, and everything else. Why? Because that person is an asset to national defense. Right. You think they're going to lose an asset to national defense on an aircraft that nobody's watching? I'm sorry, it doesn't happen that way.
And don't we have satellites in the sky that can see every plane, no matter where they're at?
Well, they do that, especially when you have an American asset on board. You track that aircraft. Plus, it has it's called a ghost escort. That means it's another craft near it. It's a ghost. It has an escort. Nobody can see the escort, right?
Right.
They weren't flying by them. So, you know, just think of that. So that means if Nibiru is real, if the binary system is real, Pastor Paul, they're already prepared. Right.
So
they're already prepared.
What I'm hearing you say, and I want because for time's sake, I'm hearing you say that in a roundabout way, what I'm reading between the lines, that they've seen a moon type, planet type thing that's probably circling a much bigger star, which would be called the dwarf star or wormwood. Like we could call it something, but they probably see Nibiru, or some planet maybe around Nibiru. So it's sort of like what Jeremiah Stitchin was saying, and it kind of matches what we can read about from the Peruvians and the Mayans and the Incas and Aztecs and some of them who wrote about this type of thing. So you're saying they see the one that's circling, but there's a bigger one, you know, that's just behind that. They don't see everything, but they've known about this for at least 14 or 7 years. But they've known about it before that. But let's just say they're getting a more clear focus. They can see it behind the sun. They're starting to let drips and drabs of disclosure out. And this is why they've been building these cities. This is why things have been going the way it's going. Let me ask you now, because you brought up the Area 51 will have to be flushed out. Can you I have to ask you, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's going to have to be emptied. They're going to have to go. They're going to have to leave that area. It's going to be non-viable here shortly. So
why?
You know what? There's a whole nother subject, right? As volcanism has increased, as these storms have increased, management is involved in this. Not by it's managed. Let's just say there's verifiable evidence before every single eruption, right? They already have the evidence of something else involved. And I'll tell you something, Pastor Paul, it is 100% spiritual. It is highly spiritual. And it is, if you saw the evidence, it will blow your mind. We're not talking about some fuzzy picture or something like that. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about these events that are happening around the world are almost scheduled. It is ever since they began recording this, and that started back in the 80s, it's happened the same way every single time, without fail. There's been no failure in the procedure that takes place. So we're on a timeline here. We really are on a timeline. And that timeline, Pastor Paul, is about to be made known to the populace, right? Yep. So they have no choice but to position themselves to mediate between what people will begin to panic about and some sort of explanation. This is why 2 new departments have formed. This is why they're handling some of these cases of people who have been involved in all these the alien stuff they call it. And this is why the exorcists are going all over the planet. Now, I hate to say this, but the more these things happen in the earth, the more stresses people are going to have. The more stresses they have, the more of a solution they're going to want. And they're being drawn away from Christ every single day as we know it. Because if you notice, people are not waiting upon the Lord. They're going to find out their solutions for themselves. And artificial intelligence is going to be the sealing factor in helping people excel themselves. Now, listen, we're only excelling as far as information. They have caused a hunger for information. While people are losing their health, they're losing everything. But people are satisfied by information. And they have an AI architecture in place that will blow the lid off any technology that's ever been developed by humanity. And they have to get rid of 3G because this is 2022 we're talking about. This thing goes online shortly. Shortly, this thing goes. It was scheduled. You remember when I said the one of the biggest artificial intelligence, one of the hubs, the biggest hub, the brain of it all, goes online in 2022.
Yeah,
we're talking January or February, one of those in those months, but it goes online. And when it goes online, it's not gonna shut down. It's not. It's going to begin. They're going to have neural networks connecting to it and everything else. So here we are. Here we are.
you know, wait a minute. Let me hit the. Let's see. Here it is. Sorry about that. The Nostradamus, and I talked about this yesterday, but looking at his 2022 prophecies, the best at the team that reads his prophecies, and he wrote them in 1566, but these quatrains, but there's 7 that they've identified for the next year, 2022. One of them is that he calls it non-human disciples that are immortal. He calls them non-human, immortal disciples will begin to instruct humans. This takes on a very real meaning. Okay. So basically what they were saying is Nostradamus was basically saying, without maybe saying exactly, was as modern artificial intelligence becomes more advanced each year, this warning about immortal disciples takes on a very real meaning. You find that fascinating that 500 years ago that a guy could see, when you say immortal, you could be, it could mean a lot of things. It could mean, fallen angels. It could mean, whatever. But could he have been talking about AI, you think?
Well, AI is essentially a neural network.
Okay.
AI is think of it, AI as a brain that's open, right? You can see into it and everything else, but it's also connected to everything right now. And a mortal dies. Right, an immortal disciple is naturally something that's that's non-living. I believe that's how back in those days they would name something as something not living. Right.
Yeah.
So, but here's something to add on to that.
Okay.
It's not solely artificial intelligence. Now, this is where it gets quirky. Here, I'll give you a fact. Okay. The fact that people have implants, that's a fact.
That's a fact.
People actually have implants.
Yes.
And these implants emit, they have emissions. That means they're transmitting something from when a person gets upset. Let me just say this. Your audience out there, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, you can't answer every email because some people make this stuff up. So I'm going to give you a generalization because somebody experienced this. There are times when you think about things and you get emotional. You have a specific thought. You may hear ringing in the ears. That's a mechanical ring. Your ears may get hot. And in a lot of cases, when people have a real implant, their ears get hot. They'll start getting hot, right?
Yep.
Only at times when they're thinking about things like making a decision or faith or having an emotional response to something else, they'll get hot ears or they hear that ringing. Now, if the ringing goes down in several different tones, like on a keyboard, that's not... that's not what the doctors are saying it is. This is something that's been induced. That could be a man could have put that implant in a person, or they could have picked it up otherwise. But they do have implants in the earlobes. A lot of males back in the 80s experienced having bumps on their earlobes. It looked like they had their ear pierced, but they never had a piercing. And their ears would most certainly get hot and itch and do everything else. Now, I guarantee you, a lot of your audience are probably thinking, this happened to me. You know, they get irritated only when they're emotionally compromised or something like that. They'll get hot like that each and every single time when they're thinking about something. Because in an artificial intelligence neurological, in these neuro devices, when you get emotional, you emit. Your neurons start firing off. You start emitting things, right? Which can be picked up about 1 inch away from your skin. If you have an implant, it's easy to pick up your emotional state, your brain waves, alpha, delta, and all these waves, and go transmit them somewhere else to interpret exactly what you're thinking about. In the brain waves that we emit is a perfect thought. That thought can now be deciphered thanks to the Brain Initiative that was initialized back during the time Obama was elected. He had no choice but to tell them about the Brain Initiative. The Brain Initiative actually started right before his presidency as a mandate upon all presidencies have poured money into that thing. Every single last one of them. There are certain things a president cannot say no to, and that was one of them. But they did this thing. They have 2 brains right now that have been perfectly emulated. They are machines. They're not human. They're thinking. What? They have an identity. They're talking back. They're learning things. When the Brain Initiative, when that portion completed, in about, a week, they had the mind of a 3-year-old. Within a month, they were about 20 or 30 years old, comparable age. Now, who knows what they're doing? Who knows what they're doing? But what I'm telling you is that they have hooked up this neurological network, artificial neurological network, to everything, to every electronic device made after, anything that holds an MCU or some sort of a microchip with a math coprocessor and all this stuff. It's going to process information and be part of this neural network. Your body has many cells. You have many different types of cells with different functions. All of them work together to carry out your commands, right? From your fingers to the growing of your fingernails, everything carries out a command. You have cells that grow nothing but hair on your everywhere, right? So every single portion of your body has a purpose to serve you as a whole.
I wish my brain cells would start talking to me about my hair. It's not doing too well right now.
Apparently, they found out the trigger for hair this bald. I have 1 hair left, but I'm not going to use the stuff. I'm just trying not to lose that last.
That's the first time we've gotten. That's the first any kind of description about you in 9 years. That's the first one. You only have 1 hair left on your head.
That's it.
That's the only thing we've got on that. That's about all we know. Okay. That's
the last one. I'm hoping it's not on the pillow when I wake up. Anyway, but in the world, they're getting rid of 3G. People who know electronics understand that 3G impedes on 5G transmission. So they have to get rid of that so they can have a pure connection, one device to another. Now watch. When they get rid of 3G, all electronics will act a bit differently. How many people, I wonder, noticed a delay in their computer processing for about a week? This was about 2.5 weeks ago.
Yep.
It should have been a delay, and everything they try to do is because your computer, every computer out there now has, it's running off partially an AI cloud architecture right there in your computer. So everything is linked up. There's no escape from what they did, right? Which means they can have one system that honestly can look into the entire world. Right now, they have that. And it goes up, their finishing pieces go online 2022.
Mike around the world with us, folks, tonight. Wow. I'm going to have to explore this Area 51 thing a little deeper with you maybe next week. But one thing's for sure. Oh, one other question. Is Elon Musk involved in dealing with Planet X coming? Is he involved in that? And is he also involved with the underground cities? Is he involved in in both those areas? Because
he, you know what, he knows. But I'll tell you something about Elon Musk. Elon Musk has a future envisioned for people, right? Which means he's going to be ousted soon. I can tell you, he's going to be ousted. You can't have that mentality and stay in any position like that. You got to be more of a Mark Zuckerberg type fella.
Yes, man.
But
You need to be more.
Have you looked at Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah.
That guy's weird. Have you really looked at him? He can't be human. Anyway, Elon Musk is more. He's a little too compassionate towards humanity. He really is, and they're not going to permit that. That's just a dead end. That's going to be a dead end. That really is going to be a dead end. Mike,
from around the world, we'll talk about these other things. Great night tonight. I think it was one of the better ones you've ever done. A tremendous amount of information revealed. I think you gave us a real fair assessment of 2022 and some of the warnings to look for. And we look forward to talking to you again in 2022, Lord willing. Rapture, I don't know. I'm ready to go whenever God's ready, I guess. So, Mike, thank you once again for being with people. What should people do, Mike? What would you say to the 8,500 people watching right now? What do you think that they should know? The year's almost over. It's sort of like, you're winding up another year, but you never know. Is this it? What's your advice to those watching?
Well, I'll tell you what, our way of life, right? Yeah, despite what they say is coming, but our way of life is about to radically change, right? People ought to get themselves ready for change in leadership. Leadership is going to become very desperate in the days to come.
It's going to become very desperate. I agree with you. And you know what? It may already have gotten there. It seems like it really, really is beginning to be more and more desperate all the time.
Yeah.
People really need to give their life to Jesus Christ, folks, and get saved. Really should. Mike, thank you once again, my brother. Really, hey, Happy New Year to you and your family. And we look forward to seeing you next Thursday night.
To you too, Pastor Paul. God bless. It's always an honor.
It's always an honor. Amen. Mike from the world, folks. Wow.